Hello? Yes. This works. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming, and let me introduce our ambassador, Christina Marcos-Lassen. Good morning, everyone. Really nice to see everyone here bright and early. Thank you all for being here with us this morning. And of course, a special thank you to our friends and partners from the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. We have several of you around here. We are co-organizing this event together, but also thank you, of course, to all of our speakers here today. We have a great panel of speakers, I can tell you that. We're meeting here this week, of course, for the annual session at CSW, but we're also marking the 30 years anniversary, of course, of the Beijing Platform for Action. We've talked about that for the last few days. We're also celebrating this year the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda with UN Security Council Resolution 1325. So this year, I think there's been a lot of talk about, this week has been a lot of talk about both the progress we've made, but I think we've also lamented a little bit some of the substantial gaps that are still to be realized. While I talk about women, peace and security, just wanted to mention, I said this last year too, so those who were at our event, but when we had the last index from Georgetown Institute on Women, Peace and Security Index for 2023, Denmark actually ranked #1 in that index, and we're still really proud about that. So we look forward to your next edition, Milan. But just to say, it doesn't mean we're very proud of what we have achieved on women's rights and security, but even we know that there's still a lot to be done. We are committed to advancing both the WPS agenda and the climate, peace and security agenda. We also believe that these two agendas should not be handled in silos. Climate change and gender inequality are more intertwined than we often acknowledge. And as you probably know, Denmark is a member of the UN Security Council, just started on January 1st, so for 2025, 2026. And we will work to highlight the more systematic and strategic integration of the climate, peace and security nexus in Security Council discussions and beyond. And I know this is still disputed by some. We actually have a couple of permanent members of the Security Council who do not really believe in the effects of climate change, what that means for conflict. But we are convinced, and there's a lot of evidence out there, and most of the UN membership is also convinced that climate change doesn't indeed intensify the underlying challenges, such as water and food insecurity, economic hardship, humanitarian crisis, political fragility. And a lot of this, of course, can drive conflict, accelerate conflict, and at the same time, disproportionately impact women and girls, who often face greater challenges in absorbing and coping with some of these responses to the climate shocks. At the same time, and that's of course where the 1325 agenda also comes in, women are also at the forefront to address these challenges. So as we, and I think everybody in this room agrees, they're essential to climate action, and they have to be empowered to address climate and security challenges. And that's, just on that note, we're proud in Denmark we'll launch our 5th National Action Plan on WPS this coming April. I think we're actually the first country in the world to make one originally. And I'm very happy to say that in this new upcoming action plan, climate risk have been addressed for the first time. So now on today's launch, I think this is it. Yes. We are really, really happy about our ongoing cooperation partnership with Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. We cooperate through our embassy in Washington, D.C. I think Sune is here. She's right there. She's in charge of it. Great to have you here, Sune. So we have had this cooperation for a number of years now, and thanks to the outstanding work that you do in Georgetown Institute, we are presenting today this really important new report on advancing gender, peace and security, in gender, climate, peace and security. That's the whole point here in the Security Council. And the report includes 12 targeted recommendations for Security Council members. And we look forward to using these recommendations during our term on the Council and see how it goes with convincing everybody else that that's a good idea. So with that, we look forward to a good discussion here today with the panelists on how we can work really to do that and systematically address this intersection. Again, not completely universally accepted, but at least I think you'll give us a lot of good ammunition with this report. I think looking over this great audience this morning, as it often happens when we discuss this issue, funnily enough, I don't know why, but there are mostly women in the room. That's wonderful. We're women, but at least I think there's also a good mix here. We're from many different countries. We're really very cross-regional group, and that's what's so great about these 2 weeks. CSW weeks, we really see women from all over the world, and we also represent different generations, I'm afraid to say. But I want to, on that note, express my gratitude to the women who have really paved the way for making this agenda a global priority. And one of these leaders is, of course, Ambassador Milan Revere, who also happens to be one of my favorite persons. She is probably the godmother of everything we're doing here and of 1325. So for those of you, I think everybody knows her, but for those of you who don't, thank you, Milan, just for inspiring you and for inspiring all of us and for your tireless work. We're really happy to have you here with us today.
Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you so much to Ambassador Marcus Lassen. Christina. Christina, the ambassador. Permanent representative, I might also add to that. We are so grateful for Denmark's leadership, both on women, peace, and security and climate action. And yes, #1 on the Women, Peace, and Security Georgetown Index. That index looks at the well-being of women across 3 dimensions: inclusion, security, and justice. And Denmark came out on top. So well-deserved. We come here this month also because Denmark holds the presidency of the Security Council. So it's a really important time to launch these 2 reports related to climate and the WPS agenda. And it's always such an honor for us at Georgetown to collaborate with Denmark, both the mission here and with the embassy in Washington. And I don't know how many of you know, but the ambassador was ambassador to the United States in Washington before she was coming to New York to head up the Security Council effort. So today's event reinforces the connections between women, peace, and security and the pressing challenges of climate. There are clear links between gender and climate and security. And although women are the most vulnerable often in terms of climate-induced displacement, food insecurity, environmental degradation, and more, they are underrepresented in decision-making. They have solutions. They need to be part of the solutions, but they are often marginalized in terms of that. And there is growing recognition, thankfully, finally, of the relationship of climate change to security. I was at the COP conference in Baku, and it was striking how many speakers refer to climate as a security issue. So now we're going to hear a little bit about the report. I'm going to call up Jess Keller to give us an overview, and I'm going to ask the panelists to please take their positions at the tables so that we can get started right after Jess gives us an overview. She is a former colleague of mine. She has been a policy advisor, researcher, and gender specialist in cross-cutting international affairs. She has previously served as our policy and program manager. And it's important to note that she once served with a humanitarian organization in Denmark. So all things come together. And she is a 2024 Presidential Management Fellowship finalist. So Jess, come on up here, take over the microphone, and we will all listen to the summary of the report. And then the reports will be available to whoever is interested on the way out.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Verveer, for that very kind introduction. And thank you to my fellow panelists and all the guests who have joined us today. It's an honor to be here at the Danish mission to launch our important new report, as you can see here. So as we mark the 30th anniversary since the Beijing Declaration and the midpoint of the Sustainable Development Goals, we're reminded that gender equality and sustainable peace are not just aspirations, but urgent imperatives. Climate change, as we've heard, is no longer just a distant threat. It's a present-day crisis that intensifies insecurity, displaces communities, and amplifies conflict risk, as we've heard, with a disproportionate impacts on women, girls, and other minority communities. This means that climate lens is essential to effectively respond to the security threats that women and others are facing. And as Ambassador Marcus Lasson and Ambassador Verveer noted, women are not only victims of climate security threats, but agents of change. From leading natural resource management and local adaptation efforts to driving conflict prevention and mediation, women's leadership is fundamental to sustainable solutions. Analysis from our WPS index at Georgetown also found that countries where women hold higher status tend to be more resilient to climate change impacts. And this is why addressing drivers of gender inequality is also crucial to effective climate responses. And yet still, despite these linkages, the Security Council has yet to fully institutionalize gender and climate considerations across its mandate, its resolutions, and its other operational frameworks. So this report we're launching today offers a really actionable blueprint for how the Security Council, how member states, and other international organizations can bridge these policy silos. And Denmark has already been such a leader in advancing these joint issues during its presidency that we want to build on this momentum and give some concrete recommendations for the way forward. So this means ensuring, for example, that women from climate vulnerable regions regularly brief the Council. We know their experiences provide critical insights into the challenges their communities are facing and the solutions they are already driving on the local level. We also call for integrating gender and climate risks into conflict prevention and peacekeeping mandates, creating shared language to build capacity on these intersections, and to develop standardized tools and trainings to support implementation across the UN system and in different countries and contexts where this is relevant. We have already seen some progress in this space. The UN mission in South Sudan, for example, set a very important precedent by requiring gender-sensitive climate risk assessments in its mandate and mandate renewal process. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that from our panelists. We also see initiatives like this climate security mechanism that are building the capacity of UN actors to address these linkages, but we need to go further than that. We also highlight the unrealized potential of women, peace, and security national action plans. And while some NAPs do now mention climate change, the vast majority lack implementation measures or dedicated funding streams. So we call for new or revised national action plans to really go beyond these cursory references in their background text to climate to fully and meaningfully integrate climate considerations across all 4 pillars of the WPS agenda, and include specific and measurable indicators for accountability. And colleagues at Georgetown also have another report, which we mentioned, that goes deep into how to do this across all 4 pillars. So these are not just policy ideas. They are really essential steps toward a more effective and inclusive global security architecture. And we see we have these frameworks, we have the evidence, and we have the expertise with us. What we really need now is decisive political will and action. And this discussion is already a step forward toward that goal. So thank you very much to our Danish colleagues for convening us. And I look forward to hearing more about these recommendations from the panel.
Thank you so much, Jess. We do have a very distinguished panel of experts with us this morning. So we're going to tackle some of the issues that are inherent in the topics that we are focused on. Let me start with Dr. Crystal Downing. She is the Project Director for Gender and Conflict at the International Crisis Group. where she supports colleagues across the crisis groups programs in analyzing how conflict impacts people with all of their differences and their diverse roles in preventing and responding to conflict. Prior to that, she worked at the UN University Center for Policy Research, and earlier she was a senior policy advisor at the UK mission to the UN, leading the UK's Security Council work on women, peace, and security. Crystal, wonderful to have you with us. I'm going to ask you to talk about the heart of the issue this morning, which is what are some of the most promising entry points you see in addressing gender and climate security in the Security Council's agenda, including within the Women, Peace, and Security framework. And what can council members do to provide the kind of effort that is needed in this respect?
Thanks. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Ambassador Vivier. Thank you to Denmark, Ambassador, for hosting this morning, and congratulations on your presidency. These are really challenging times for WPS. In a year where we should be celebrating progress made since 1325 and the Beijing Platform for Action, I think we all know that supporters of women's rights around the world are facing what I am thinking of at the moment as a slash and burn effort to roll back gender equality, with attacks not just on the funding that makes gender equality efforts possible, but even the language we use to describe it. And I think climate is being addressed in very similar ways and facing similar challenges. Nevertheless, I think conversations like today's are really, really important, not just to consider ways to confront the pushback, but to enable the kind of communication and coordination that's really going to be necessary among those who have the potential to confront it effectively. So I wanted to illustrate two entry points that I think are useful to think through how the structure of the WPS agenda the 4 pillars of the WPS framework can be used in efforts to tackle the challenges of climate change and conflict. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some actions that council members individually and in kind of subgroupings can take when in this current context when maybe action by the council as a whole isn't possible. So first, as highlighted in Jess's great report, climate and environmental shifts are threat multipliers in conflicts. They can amplify the risk of gender-based violence, requiring prevention and protection responses. They can create or exacerbate challenges in providing humanitarian relief, and the new political structures that are needed to address the ways that climate and environmental shifts affect different population groups can only be effective with the participation of women, especially those already working in formal and informal processes to this end. So really, like across all four pillars of the agenda, we see a lot of relevance and a useful way of structuring efforts. That said, they're not separate. These areas of risk and action are not separate, and they shouldn't be siloed. They interact in myriad ways, and the tools provided by the pillars of the agenda should not be employed in isolation, but as part of a cohesive, tailored approach with elements from all four. Similarly, WPS and climate, peace, and security should not be siloed areas of work, and a more integrated approach that responds to the reality of gender inequality and climate change and conflict is needed. So the two examples that I wanted to focus on this morning are Somalia, where women and girls have faced specific risks, including, as Ambassador Vivier mentioned, food insecurity, barriers to aid, sexual violence, and all of these have been exacerbated by climate change in both rural communities and displacement camps. And Colombia, where women are both highly impacted by environmental degradation and related insecurity and at the front lines of confronting those risks. So I guess in terms of kind of actions that the councils can take, and I can provide a little bit more context on Somalia and Colombia later if that's useful, but I wanted to really turn to the actions that I think council members can take. First, in terms of breaking down those silos between the pillars of the WPS agenda and between WPS and climate, peace, and security, council members should continue to consider these topics in tandem, including in the informal experts groups, which are such important tools for informing council members, for maintaining the focus on these areas, and opportunities to examine synergies through initiatives such as the WPS shared commitments and the joint pledges on climate, peace, and security, which I know in each of those areas there are kind of challenges at the moment on their composition, but I think there's still fantastic opportunities for coordination and for joint messaging on really the ways that all of these issues intersect, and to ensure women's participation in climate resilience and peace building efforts. Council members who do continue to uphold commitments in these two thematic areas should encourage UN entities to take practical and integrated measures, including by ensuring that relevant existing language in mandate resolutions is used to reinforce each area of UN entities' work. And on this last point, I wanted to turn to the UN TMIS mandate, the Somalia Transition Mission, which recognizes the effects of climate change in Somalia by prioritizing the transfer of coordination activities around development and climate financing from the former peace operation to the UN country team and other key stakeholders. So council members can use that language that's already in there to encourage the UN country team and the mission itself to do that kind of transfer of operations in a way that recognizes the different experiences and roles of people of different genders. To address the challenges of the Somalia case and to leverage the financing that the mandate mentions specifically, gender-responsive cash transfers, livelihood programs would ensure that women's needs are met. But these kinds of relief measures are only going to be effective if women can take full advantage of them, free from gender-based violence. So the protection measures that also being transferred over to the relevant stakeholders in this period really need to link up with relief and recovery. Measures like improved camp lighting, sufficient firewood sources to reduce risk. With that last example of the firewood, this is a traditionally a woman's responsibility to collect firewood, and it does present additional risk for sexual violence. So these are the kinds of synergies that can be addressed through the mandate, but really the messaging from council members has to be really clear that this is a priority. And the actors in protection, humanitarian, and other sectors need to work together with, not just alongside, gender specialists, climate and environment specialists in a joint integrated effort. And then turning to kind of country-specific efforts that might be taking place at the national level that council members can support. So Colombia provides a great example at the moment with the recently launched National Action Plan on WPS and a feminist foreign policy. The NAP recognizes specifically the protection risks faced by women who speak out to protect the environment. It incorporates diverse themes, including extractive industries, climate adaptation, allowing it to address WPS and climate peace and security in a truly integrated manner. Its commitments to ensuring the safe participation of women in natural resource management provide an example of how climate and environmental issues can be addressed in national action plans. And of course, as we all know, the challenge for Colombia, as it is for so many other countries with national action plans, is to secure the funding to roll out these measures in a really cohesive and timely way. The feminist foreign policy that Colombia rolled out last year also includes the priority of environmental justice, which is a great recognition of this important issue on which partnership with other countries can really contribute and go a long way to overcoming gender inequality. So individual council members, as well as groupings, ideally the country as a whole, could consider kind of encouraging these initiatives in the context of the 2016 peace agreement as well. They reinforce a lot of the peace agreement's gender provisions, and individually can consider funding these initiatives as well. And I also just wanted to flag that with Somalia and Colombia specifically, it's kind of a unique case at the moment. Somalia is on the council. Colombia is expected to join the council next year. And that places them in a really great puts them in a really great position to push themselves for these two issues to be addressed in an interlocking way when they're on the council. It's a lot harder for other council members to turn away from the requests of a council member who is also under discussion. It's not impossible, but I think it's a lot harder than it would be if they weren't directly involved in those discussions. So I guess there's two things that I wanted to flag. And then I guess there's just a lot more I guess we can say about the global political divisions on climate and gender. And I really think that, as I said, discussions like today from this integrated approach are going to be really important going forward. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Crystal, for getting us off to a good start. And I think those recommendations about breaking down the silos between these issues, understanding the synergies and really capitalizing on them, using mandate language more effectively, and then looking at country-specific opportunities. We're going to turn now to Mahashka. She is the Public Affairs Officer at the UN Political and Peacebuilding Affairs Office, DPPA. She, in her role, centers around providing technical and political advice on how to assess and analyze climate-related peace and security risks and how to integrate climate considerations into the DPPA overview and of its work. She worked at the Policy Center for New South previously as an international relations specialist and at the OECD. Maha, we're so happy to have you with us. I don't know how many people actually knew that this climate work was going on in DPAA. So let me start by asking you, what are some concrete examples that you see in addressing climate change as a security threat? And how do joint efforts like the UN Climate Security Mechanism work to overcome them? But first, maybe tell us what that mechanism is and what it does. And we're going to let our ambassador leave because the Security Council beckons this morning. So we want her to do her work, and she always does so well. Thank you so much. Miha, take it away.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much to the Permanent Mission of Denmark for the invitation to brief on this topic. I will tell you a little bit about the work we do on climate peace and security in the department where I work. And I will also introduce the climate security mechanism, which many of you may have heard of. Is that better?
Yes.
Perfect. So DPPA, the Political Affairs and Peacebuilding Department, has a global mandate, but a lot of our focus is really on supporting our special political missions that are deployed in the field. And the majority of these missions are actually deployed in areas that are both vulnerable to climate change and are facing some fragility risks. DPPA is one of the founding members of this climate security mechanism. It was established in 2018. It is an interagency initiative that is composed of my department together with UNDP, UNEP, and the Department of Peace Operations. And what this mechanism does is twofold. First, it informs approaches to peace and security while integrating climate change considerations in it. And at the same time, it tries to create co-benefits of prevention for resilience. So it has these two coins. How does this work in practice? The idea of this interagency initiative is to harness the specific advantages or comparative advantages of each entity. So DPPA and DPO, we bring the expertise and political analysis, the peace and security part. UNDP is the largest provider of technical advice, also larger implementer of action, and climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation. And then UNEP provides the scientific expertise on climate and environmental work. So for the last 5 years, the CSM has streamlined its work into 4 priority areas. The first one is analysis and action in the field. We know that nothing that we do can be done without having the proper data. And this includes, of course, gender sensitive, gender informed data, because we need to understand how the effects of climate change impact different parts of society. The vulnerability that populations face is not the same. It depends on each person, and it depends also on the exposure. But I'll get into that a little bit later. The second priority area is advocacy, partnership, and convening. I was telling you, Ambassador, earlier that a lot of our work in the beginning was about raising awareness, really, on the risks. We're finding ourselves now in a very different constellation where we are responding to a lot of demand from the UN, but also from regional partners and country offices for capacity building. So they recognize that these linkages exist, and now it's about what do we do to address them. The third one is knowledge generation and co-generation, because we don't do this work alone. We work with all parts of the UN. We work with civil society, with think tanks, and with research institutions. And then the fourth priority area is capacity building. Like I was saying, the idea is not to duplicate. The idea is not to have one gender advisor, one climate advisor, and everything else continues the same. This has to be mainstream, and mainstreaming requires capacity building. It requires all other, in the context of special political missions, it requires that all the staff know what climate, peace, and security is, and that they recognize it also as inherent to their own work, because it provides opportunities to advance their political and other areas of missions work. So instrumental to the work of the climate security mechanism, and I think that's what they're most known for, is the deployment of advisors, climate, peace, and security advisors. We had last year 2 new advisors deployed, one to UNOAU, our regional office in the African Union, and the second one in Afghanistan, in UNAMA. They join advisors in special political missions in West Africa and the Sahel, based in Dakar, in Central Africa, based in Libreville, in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia, and in Iraq, and of course in South Sudan, which is the only advisor in a peacekeeping operation so far. And then UNDP, through the climate security mechanism, has also deployed 3 advisors to regional organizations in the Lake Chad Basin Commission, in the Liptako-Gourma Authority, and soon in the Pacific Islands Forum. What do these advisors do? They work on climate-sensitive analysis. They mainstream climate considerations into the work of the missions. And they bring partners. They have a big convening role to design innovative and practical solutions. The role of this advisor is really context specific. It depends on where they are. But in all their work, promoting inclusion and empowerment of women is a key consideration. And I would say promoting inclusion of all marginalized groups. And concretely, what does it mean? It means having better gender-sensitive information, like I was saying earlier, understanding how climate change interacts with social, economic, demographic, political factors, and to get a better sense of what are the strategies that work and what do not. And then the other side of the coin is, how do we make sure that our engagement on climate, peace, and security opens doors for inclusion and for participation of all members of society? On more specifically the linkages and this between the climate, peace, and security and the W peace and security, a lot has already been said, so I will not repeat it. But basically, the way we view it is that natural disasters do not discriminate. It's really the systemic inequalities and power structures that determine who is more vulnerable and who is not. And you said that very eloquently, Jessie. While women are disproportionately affected, they are also unique agents of change. They are already doing so much work to make their communities more resilient. And it's really important that these 2 agendas complement each other, that they are adaptable to the cultural context what they're talking about. So I thought your recommendation on country specific was very pertinent. And then women's voices must be amplified, both in the peace building and the conflict prevention side but also in climate and resilience. And then on the examples, I have a few for you, but before I wanted to say, I should have started with this actually, that my department 2 years ago published a report called Weathering Two Storms, Gender and Climate in Peace and Security. I do not have a copy because we've been giving it a lot, but it's available online. And please get in touch after this if you'd like to receive a copy. The second one I wanted to mention is the Peace Building Fund thematic review on climate security, which was published in 2023. And it looked at over 70 peace building fund projects that had a climate or environmental lens. And essentially, one of the key messages from this thematic review was that environmental peace building offers opportunities to increase the participation of women and youth. There has been a lot of examples in this report, but one of them is in Yemen. This project was promoting the participation of women in water usage groups and simultaneously reducing conflict over water access and water sharing. And these results from this review was that a bottom-up peace building approach around natural resources offers really promising areas for addressing sources of conflict, but also for promoting inclusion. And in passing, I also want to say that this peace building fund, the Secretary General's Peace Building Fund, continues to receive a lot of requests for funding of climate sensitive projects. It has invested already 170 million in over 74 projects since 2016, and many of which have a lot of co-benefits, including for women. The second example I wanted to mention is in West Africa and the Sahel. Our advisor there in UNOWAS has worked very closely with the regional organization, ECOWAS, on promoting youth-led initiatives on climate action and conflict prevention. And he was telling us of a lot of very innovative projects, and one of which that really stuck with me was a woman in Burkina Faso that started a small solar plant startup. And this project helped light up her village, and this dissuaded some attacks by non-armed groups. So it's not a direct link, but these small examples really showcase, I think, how we can promote solutions that address both. Another thing I wanted to mention about the work of UNOWAS, because one of the recommendations you made, Jesse, was on the tools. Having the tools, I think that's a very important point. UNOWAS has done a training manual together with UNICRI on addressing or the prevention of violent extremism and climate and peace and security, and what this means for different communities. And this stems from the recognition, of course, that climate change impacts exacerbate conflicts over resources and can create fertile ground for recruitment, but also that women they are more disproportionately impacted by climate change, but they are also the first one to suffer from gender-based violence from PU. Yeah, I think I'll stop here, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, I think you made us all, I'll include myself, a lot smarter about the conflict security mechanism. I was not aware that the resource was as powerful as it is, and I'm gratified to hear the demand is so great. I hope you can meet it on capacity building and all the other areas, because that's a good sign that we're beginning to understand this linkage. We're going to turn now to the Honorable Esther Ikere. She is the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare in South Sudan. She has more than 18 years of experience as a gender practitioner and advocate in policy development and advocacy. She's implemented a range of programs, including Women, Peace, and Security, women's participation and engagement in peace building and conflict resolution in South Sudan, and she has developed a 7-point agenda for the implementation of the agreement on the resolution of the conflict in her country. And she's done so much more. Esther, we're so happy to have you with us all the way from South Sudan. And I wanted to ask you, what are some examples of how your country has approached addressing climate change in national level WPS implementation? And what lessons can we learn from your experience?
Thank you so much, Melen, for the introduction. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Permanent Mission Gender to the United Nations for extending invitation to the Republic of South Sudan. Distinguished Excellencies, distinguished panelists, this is a very important moment for us to speak about some of the best experiences we had in South Sudan on how to integrate the emerging security threats and particularly climate change into our women, peace and security agenda. One of the discussions that has been ongoing is that the role of women in climate change has not been taken into consideration in different contexts. And many countries have developed women, peace and security agenda with exclusively leaving alone issues of how women can be part and parcel of the climate change agenda. So I think in South Sudan, in our first action plan, which was developed in 2020, we have never focused much on climate change within our action plan. So in our review, we were able to learn a good lesson of seeing how do we ensure that women's participation is also very critical on climate-related issues. And because of that, the architectural design of the new action plan on women, peace and security, we have recognized that climate change is a security issue. And that gave us a base to begin looking into how do we integrate climate change within our national action plan, which present the women, peace and security agenda of the country. So we were able to see that all the 4 pillars are relevant in the context of South Sudan, whether issues of prevention, participation, protection, and also relief and recovery is very relevant for South Sudan. But we begin to look into how do we ensure that emerging security threat becomes a cross-cutting pillar across all the 4 pillars of the women, peace and security agenda. And within that, we're also able to see that security sector reform is another cross-cutting issue. So we were able to look at the prevention. How do we mainstream emerging security threat in prevention, in participation, in protection, and also in the relief and recovery? So we are looking across all the pillars, mainstreaming issues of climate change across the 4 pillars. And we were able to see issues of looking into the frameworks that exist within the country. One of the gaps that we have seen is that information about the role of women in climate change, the literature is very scarce in the country. So having a knowledge base is very important. But also at the same time, we have realized that there are a lot of silos within the climate agenda and security nexus. Institutions are working separately in their own silos, and there's no linkage that is seen within the national level that can be able to address the nexus. So last year, we had a very good discussion, and I think the mission, the UN mission in South Sudan, took a very important coordinating role to ensure that how can we break these silos and try to bring together the line ministries working on the same note. And I think ministries of environment, climate, gender, where I come from, natural resource management, we are able to come together and begin the discussions at the country level and see how do we integrate the nexus within our action plan. So if you look into our framework, we are able to see how do women contribute in issues of prevention, on issues of participation in climate-related intervention, but also trying to see how do we build the resilience of women within the communities on issues of climate change. And that's one of the best examples we have learning within the context of South Sudan, that as we move forward, we need to see into it how do we ensure agenda transformative research within the country, but also within the policy and also within programming. Then we'll be able to inform the perspective in the country. But also we have learned another important example is our partnership together with the institutes of higher learning, the academia, and also we are trying to see how do we build knowledge base within the country that will be able to provide evidence-based information that will support the policy development on the climate change in the country. And that has been one of the best examples we have in South Sudan, which we are moving forward through this discussion. Thank you.
Now, Esther, that was so instructive to hear how you're actually integrating the issue climate into the Women, Peace, and Security National Action Plan. And one of the reports that we're launching today has to do with this issue, this very issue of national action plans and the climate issue, and the real necessity of linking the two together. And as we've been hearing from everybody, not siloing these issues. And of course, partnerships are always so important. We're now going to turn to Dr. Jasmine Nadio Galassi. She is the Senior Program Director at the Global Network for Women Peace Builders. Very people on the ground doing all of this hard work. She supervises network programs on WPS in Asia, and the Pacific, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, etc. And among the programs she coordinates is climate action in 13 conflict-affected areas in the Philippines. And before you start, I want to remind the audience that we're going to do Q&A. So I may forego the second round and turn to you. So think about the questions that you want to ask. So, Jasmine, based on your work with members and partners of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, what types of strategies and programs have you found most effective in advancing this synergy, this link that we're talking about today between WPS, climate, and security at the local level? And how can the international community support these efforts better than we're doing, clearly? We all know that.
Thank you very much, Milan. I'm very excited to answer that question. So good morning, everyone. I'm happy to share with you my thoughts on this question. I'd like you to imagine this. You know, in a rural town of Cuyapo, Nueva Ecija in the Philippines, every couple preparing for marriage must plant trees before saying, I do, as a prerequisite for receiving their marriage license. This tradition, started by a woman vice mayor, is simple yet profound, symbolizing not just love and commitment between two couples, between two people, but also love and commitment to protect the environment and promote peace building and conflict prevention. What's the connection with peace? Nueva Ecija is known as one of the breeding grounds of rebels because of the increasing poverty aggravated by climate risks. Tree planting is a climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy that also addresses poverty, one of the root causes of conflicts. Now travel with me to Quezon, another province in the Philippines, where a different challenge unfolds. Reconstruction of the Kaliwa Dam in Quezon, Philippines is a deeply contested project by the Duterte government. Duterte is now in the ICC, that highlights water security in Metro Manila, the country's imperial region over indigenous rights and environmental protection. The dam threatens the ancestral lands of the indigenous peoples who opposed their displacement, loss of livelihoods, and the destruction of their cultural heritage. The presence of security forces to suppress opposition has further escalated tensions, raising human rights concerns. To advance gender, climate, and security, GNWP partners there, led by women, driven rights-based strategies to amplify local voices. You know, they marched to Malacanang and wanted, to speak to the president about the situation. So Indigenous women like Nanay Conching are leading the charge, advocating for sustainable alternatives, documenting human rights violations, and mobilizing national and global support. In Mindanao, local women and environmental advocates join forces, integrating the use of traditional media and social media to amplify their joint initiatives. By training journalists and content creators, they ensure that stories of women and youth leading climate action are not just told, but heard, driving broader engagement and support. Friends across local communities worldwide where GNWP works, women and communities are leading the charge in building climate resilience, securing peace, and ensuring that policies are more than just words on paper. GNWP amplifies local WPS and YPS and climate security by providing small grants to expand and replicate good practices. We also work with local authorities like governors, mayors, municipal and village councils to adopt local laws or policies to support climate change and WPS and YPS initiatives, including through financing from the local government budget. In summary, the strategy comprises of 4 components. 1, providing technical or financial support. 2, enhancing visibility through the use of established media channels, that's radio, TV, and print. 3, advocating for the adoption of local laws and policies. And 4, ensuring that outstanding local initiatives on WPS, YPS, and climate security serve as inspiration for national, regional, and global action. And the movement, friends, doesn't stop there. In Surigao del Sur, women are leading climate risk mapping efforts, incorporating gender and peace perspectives into disaster risk reduction. When women are at the table, responses become more inclusive, effective, and community-driven. In Calbayog City, local advocates are not only creating climate-responsive plans, but also ensuring that gender-sensitive budgeting is part of governance, because a plan without funding is just an idea. In Samar and Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, young leaders and women are restoring mangroves, protecting coastlines, and ensuring that environmental action and peace building go hand in hand. These local initiatives, Miran, offer powerful lessons. They show that solutions must be acceptable to the community, led by the community, culture and context specific, and sustainable. But they also highlight an urgent need, stronger support from the international community. So what can be done? 1, invest in local leadership. Direct financial and technical support allows communities to scale up what already works. Number 2, integrate grassroots solutions into policy. Local initiatives should inform national and global strategies, ensuring community voices shape decision-making. Number 3, facilitate knowledge sharing and capacity building. Cross-regional learning empowers communities with new tools and strategies. Number 4, strengthen partnerships. Collaboration between government, civil society, media, and global institutions ensures that climate resilience and peace-building efforts are holistic and inclusive. This year, my friends, presents a critical opportunity with the anniversaries of the Beijing Declaration, UNSCR 1325, and the 2030 Agenda. But milestones mean little without action. The women leading these initiatives are not waiting for permission to act. They are already shaping a more sustainable and peaceful future. Now it's up to us to amplify their voices, invest in their leadership, and turn local innovations into global impact. Because when women lead, the earth survives and communities thrive. Thank you very much.
Yes, that was excellent. And I think all of us who know of the hard work that peace builders do at the local level every day are reinforced in our awareness by what you just said. And it's really a shame that the level of support going to local peace builders is so limited when their role is so enormous in creating a better world. But the 4 points you laid out, I think everybody was scribbling madly to get them down. They were excellent, and I love the way you started with planting those trees. I think we'll all leave here remembering that and maybe instituting that custom in other places. So let's turn to all of you and start with your questions to the panelists. Helen, are you going to go around with the microphone? And we have a question already in the back there, a couple of questions. So we'll take those two for starters, and then one here in the front.
Thank you. Excellent presentations, and thanks a lot for that. My question goes directly to Honorable Esther. I work at the UN mission in South Sudan as the Senior Women's Protection Advisor, and we were talking yesterday about conflict-related sexual violence. I would like to know Honorable Esther's views on whether there is, according to her, any link between climate change and the climate situation and CRSV in South Sudan? And if yes, can she help us with a few thoughts of how to tackle that? Thank you.
Interesting question. Esther. Oh, well, here.
Answer immediately, or we take rounds of questions?
Well, why don't you start with that one for yourself? Because
okay.
The connection between potential.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there a connection?
Thank you. Yesterday we had a very good discussion about conflict-related sexual violence, and I think we were panelists together yesterday with you. And one of the linkages we have seen in that is that climate change is also a bigger predictor to violence, but also including gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence. One of the issues that we have seen in South Sudan is that with the conflict in Sudan, we have a lot of influx of refugees and returnees within the country, which are at the border point. One of the things that we're trying to look at critically together with UNMISS. And within the border points, there's a tendency of people excluding interventions on conflict-related sexual violence, which is already a risk that we have seen within the country. And there's a lot of linkage between climate change, conflict, and also gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence. One of the things we have discussed is that within our own discussion within the country, information is a bit limited. And one of our partnership with the University of Juba, and already we have started with the Sud Institute, is to carry out a study to determine the extent of how climate change can contribute to gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence. And that can build an evidence base within the country that will allow us to carry out comprehensive interventions at the country level. But despite this study is ongoing now with the Sud Institute, we are able to establish a national task force on gender-based violence, which we are calling for coordination and consultations at the national level to see how do we respond to conflict-related sexual violence issues within the border areas that have been prone to forced displacement and the migration of people moving from one country to another context of South Sudan. So there's a strong linkage between conflict and also gender-based violence. So climate change is also a big contributor to inducing conflict-related sexual violence in South Sudan. Thank you.
Very interesting. We have a question in the back there on the end. And then here in the front, we'll take those two, and then we'll take another round. So let's do on the end. Yes. You have a question? No. No. Oh, sorry. Okay, Nadine, up here.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentations and examples of on the local level what you're doing. But I wanted to cap that off by focusing on this. My name is Nina Lahoud. Served for 34 years with the UN and working with NGOs now. It was striking to me on the Security Council angle. The resistance, as we know, those who follow the Security Council, the pushback on climate change are sometimes the same players that push back on gender. And the knock-on effect of assessments, whether they're during the course of a mission or before you're establishing a mission or reassessment of the mandate, is the catalyst for what makes it into the Secretary General's report to the Council, and in turn, often generates the content of a Security Council resolution, and in turn, then gets the budgetary bodies to finance the elements of the resolution. I'm saying all of this, I did a study on the importance of assessments, and it was striking to me that Maha mentioned, and it really shocked me, that of the various experts you have, there's only one in peace operations, as opposed to special political missions, which are more multidimensional usually. So that's shocking. And my question is that if we want to make movement on the Security Council level, and maybe this is already being done, one obvious place would be when they do the periodic strategic assessments for the country plan, the UNCT plan, you have the strategic assessments there on the development side, also periodic assessments to reassess the mandate, that you convince UNEP to contribute someone to go on that team. I battled for a long time in DPO to even get gender advisors on the assessment teams. It's a sort of boys club decision. That's one. But secondly, whether you could manage when you have briefers to the council. It's so amazing what you've all said. We don't always get those kind of civil society briefers that mix the WPS and the climate aspect. So, the council president is usually determinative of who gets to speak from civil society. So there's a whole lot of plotting to go on in advance of that. So I just wanted to see what you think about my proposal on the assessments and strategic assessments, because those go on to the life of a mission. And also for you all to scheme on who should make it into briefing, who gets selected as a briefer for your country-specific Security Council meetings. Thank you.
Great. Now there are two questions behind. Nina?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for such excellent presentations. My worries is that, for the whole issue of climate change and gender, with the current, severe lack of resources, is that it turned into just a title, without investing on, the capacity building of women organizations and grassroots civil society. Because if we really want to make the connections between women, peace and security and climate change and environmental degradations, that requires serious investments on the capacity building of grassroots women organizations, because they are the ones who are at the front line and they are the ones who are driving the change. And, I'd really like to ask the presenters, how do they see that happen? We haven't been seeing, we have not been seeing significant investment on capacity building. We are all aware of the implications, of climate change and environmental degradation, extraction of resources in conflict and gender-based violence. That's a reality we are living in and day out. But at the same time, we haven't seen any significant investment on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask, we have very little time left. Do you want to do you have your question? We'll do one up here. Right in the front row.
Thank you. My name is Camilla. I'm from the Danish Parliament. I'm working with women's health. So I have a question about that. How do you perceive climate change in terms like too much water or too less water concerning women's and children's health, example with menstruation, pregnancy, and childbirth? And do you have to observe some specific impacts when you're looking at climate change with women's health? You have discussed about violence at women, but also the lack of water or something with climate change. I have wondered why.
Okay, good. And one last question. I'm sorry. We're going to take this one here. And please be brief in your questions so we can get to these answers.
So my name is Emily, and I'm the youth delegate of Denmark. Thank you so much for your presentations. It was really interesting to hear how you want to involve gender equality in the discussion of climate change. Something I was wondering about is I've heard from, for example, Mahasha, that you speak about the limited resources that we face in climate crisis, and seeing these limited resources as a potential for cooperation and to have more inclusive work. And I would like for you to elaborate on that because I thought it was really interesting.
Okay, who wants to start? We have assessments, who briefs, resources for capacity building at the grassroots level, critical connections to women's health and climate, and then the last question.
Okay, I can start. I won't take all of those questions by any means. I think,
Short.
yeah. I guess I'll just take briefers and health, I think. On briefers, yes. I mean, civil society briefers are a key source of information for the council and a really great way to integrate these kinds of issues. Council, like presidencies, can be very selective in who they choose to invite. And I think it's a great point. That's like kind of a headline should be always for the presidency, like really think through strategically who you want to invite and encourage them to draw on the breadth of their expertise to integrate these kinds of issues into their briefing. So I think, yeah, and just to say, I think that's a great point. Which doesn't mean to say that there can't be pushback against briefers from other council members, but I think it generally is the prerogative of the presidency. So it's a great way. On women's health, I just wanted to make the point. Yes, so a crisis group has done research in Somalia, where we found, our interlocutors told us that pregnant and lactating women were malnourished due to drought. And that obviously creates healthcare needs, also linked to sexual violence. So these kind of traditional responsibilities like water collection and firewood collection, which become more difficult in the context of drought. So women are going further distances, exposing themselves to greater risk of sexual violence, which then in turn creates greater need for sexual and reproductive health care. So just to say that, yeah, absolutely, there's a link between all of these kinds of issues and definitely an acute need to integrate the response as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll start with the question you asked, Nina, I believe. Yes, briefly. On the assessment, indeed, it's very important to have the right analysis to inform the reporting to the council, to in turn inform the mandate, no doubt. Currently, there are 5 peacekeeping missions that do have language on the linkages between climate, peace, and security. But something I didn't have time to say in my remarks is that all of this work in the climate security mechanism has been made possible thanks to the generous contribution of member states, of 12 member states, many of which are in this room, and our donor partners. So all of this is extra budgetary. So we do not have, it's not because it is in the mandate that the missions will get the resources to do this work. On women and health, one example that came to mind, I participated in a study on climate, peace, and security in Mauritania. And we went and met with the communities at the border with Mali. And we met with women, civil society, and actually health was one of the key topics that they flagged. They said that due to the warmth, increasingly warm weather, their daily work was getting more difficult. They could not walk or travel to go to the closest dispensary to get health services for routine checkups, but also for maternal health. So this is also very important. And UNICEF has actually done lots of reports on how climate change impacts children. So I'm happy to send you some reports on this. On youth, I think under opportunities, what I meant by that is that within this limited resource environment, when we can, it's amazing if we can address both climate change and gender inequality. I hope I was clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to talk about the issue of capacity building at the grassroots level, which has not taken shape. And I think that's the discussion even within the country, that women organizations are very critical in providing information, but at the same time doing advocacy around climate issues in the country. And one of the call is to see how do we support women organizations. We are calling on government, but also to partners to see how do we strengthen the support to women organizations that can take critical role at the grassroots level in terms of climate sensitive strategies and mitigation plans. At the same time, when we talk about women health, I think we have a very good scenario in South Sudan. When we have too much water in the oil producing area, it is an issue to the women's health. We are witnessing abnormal deliveries of children in those particular areas in the Upper Nile region because of too much water, which is affecting the oil production, and at the same time increasing health risk for mothers within the location. And I think there have been a lot of discussion within the country to different levels within the parliament to see how do we mitigate the impact of climate change, but also at the same time affecting the human population within the country in connection to the oil exploration within the country. And a lot of strategies have been put in place to different levels, to the government, but also to the oil producing companies, but also to the communities. So I think the discussion between gender, climate, and security is very important, not only for developing policies and frameworks, but actually for building the resilience of the communities that are affected by climate change. So these are things that need to be taken forward into discussion. Yeah, resources are getting limited. You know, the shrinking funding is there, which is a big issue that needs to be tackled. And one of the strategies is to work together. You know, for us, we always advocate for cross-sector working together to see how do we harmonize, but also at the same time reduce duplication and ensure that there's efficiency in terms of the approach. But if we continue to work in silos, then the shrinking resources is going to affect the planning within the country. And even if we have very good plans for adaptation and mitigation, but not working together, no coordination, then it becomes challenging to address the climate-related issues within the country. Thank you.
I'd also like to address that question on how do we ensure financing for capacity building. I just have to, suggestions here. Number one is to incorporate gendered climate security risks and climate resilience into national action plans, because national action plans usually have budget. Okay? They should have budget. The second is to institutionalize gender-responsive climate governance. In the Philippines, for example, every level of governance, has disaster risk and reduction, office. And each government agency, from the lowest to the highest, has a 5% gender and development budget. So we never run out of budget for capacity building because, that's assured. It's from the government. Thank you.
Well, I'm always sad when we run out of time, which we have again, and so much interest. But I think we got a good start on this issue area and the linkages, the critical nature, and the fact that the Security Council needs to be much more engaged. So thank you to the Danish mission for bringing us together and for their leadership on this. Thank you to the panelists. To each of them, you made enormous contributions to our greater understanding. The mission has laid out a wonderful reception here for all of you. They will stay. Some of us have to leave. Unfortunately, you know what it's like up here at CSW. But thank you for coming. And most importantly, thank you for the work you're all going to continue to do in this area. So thank you all.
Thank you.